This is Metabolic Radio, the podcast dedicated to keeping you informed when it comes to everything fitness. My name is Taylor Empey, and with the help of my co-host Shane Pace, we aim to expose the truths about the health and fitness industry. The information and suggestions given in this podcast should not be considered as clinical or medical advice. Consult with a physician before implementing any information provided on this podcast. All right, this is part 2 of our series on how your cubicle life is killing you, with a little emphasis on muscle imbalances, deviations, and scoliotic patterns.
Which was a surprise.
You sound so surprised.
I was. I'm not now.
I know, you're like, I'm so surprised.
No. I said, which was a surprise.
Yeah, it was. But it was a good little... I wouldn't even call it a tangent, because it wasn't a tangent. No. It was just a good little... I don't know. Transition. Yeah. So if you haven't tuned into part 1 of this, this is part 2.
Hold on. If you haven't, why have you not?
Yeah.
Really?
Why wouldn't you?
Seriously?
Why wouldn't you listen to them chronologically? Jeez.
Yes. I mean, granted, number one.
It's not like iTunes lists the most recent one first. Oh wait, it totally does.
That's true. We need to change that.
I'll figure it out.
We're calling Apple.
But see, I like our newer episodes because of quality, and quality's about to improve.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus the older ones.
I'm excited. Okay,
and
so,
I think
so this is part 2.
Got more comfortable on the microphone a little bit, too.
No.
Whatever. So anyway, part 2. And in part 1, that all aside, part 1 we covered sleep patterns, postural deviations, muscle imbalances, and muscle atrophy. And so we're going to continue finishing about muscle imbalances and talk about some things that Shane feels is pretty important about scoliotic pattern and just other spinal deviations and different things like that, muscle imbalances that he knows a lot more on because of his background in massage therapy versus mine in personal training. And but we're also going to try to cover joint pain, weight gain, energy, and stress.
I'm going to stress Taylor out.
You usually do.
That's good. Sweet. I don't have to try that.
No,
that's not fair. That takes it away from me.
Now I think it's just to the point where I'm like, that's Shane.
Yeah. You should have known that early, though.
No, I've known that.
I know. From the very first day, probably. I don't hide things much.
So do you want to continue right where we left off? Or do you want to knock out some of those quicker things?
Well, see, we can talk about joint pain in the same breath. So...
Okay.
Take
it away.
Yeah. Let's go on.
Okay.
Do you want to go with joint pain? Let's go.
Oh, you want to start on the other stuff?
Yeah, because we're going to tie it back in. We're going to go back into massage therapy because I almost think this might become an episode on its own, but that's okay.
Okay. Well, then let's talk about weight gain because that one is more general, and it's interrelated. But when we're talking about a sedentary job, sedentary lifestyle, a cubicle lifestyle, quote unquote, or desk job.
Let's just tie all 3 of those together.
Okay. Weight gain is going to happen naturally. We touched upon it in the previous episode about because muscle atrophy. Now that technically is actually weight loss, but what happens is when you muscle atrophies, it atrophies because your body determines it doesn't need it anymore. So you're not doing any activity that's stimulating its retention or development. So it says, hey, this is energy costing tissue that we're not using. Let's get rid of it because your body's whole goal is survival. So it just says, I don't need this muscle to survive right now based off my activity, so I'm going to get rid of it. So then your metabolism slows down because muscle takes more energy to fuel it than fat does. And so your metabolic rate slows down. And then something as simple as overeating slightly, just with a little bit surplus energy, but a sedentary lifestyle, that's how people gain weight very slowly and gradually, but consistently year after year, because they've lost their, people refer to it as that stoking the fire of your metabolism. And the analogy is loose, but it kind of, when you're talking about taking away muscle, your fire gets diminished and it becomes this very small kindling, you could say. And so you don't really have that great of a metabolic rate that demands a lot of energy. So it's easier for you to gain weight when you're sedentary.
Well, that's the reason why I want to tie those three in the end together anyway, because that'll cause higher stress levels and your energy will go down.
Mm-hmm. So, even somebody who does some resistance training like we talked about and still does work a sedentary job, or someone who's very active but they work a sedentary job, they're just very active outside because of their lifestyle choices, though that kind of person can still maintain a great body composition, have great health, stress management, those kind of things, because they've maintained a healthier metabolism, healthier body type, even amidst a sedentary lifestyle or job. But what happens is when you put that down. When you talk about your stress levels going up, that comes as a result of inactivity.
Oh, for sure. So
it can come as a result of that.
Well, not
it can also
just
come
that.
As a result of other factors.
So what's one of the easiest ways to break stress down, at least for me, is going and doing things like, again, I used to do it with boxing.
Let me cite one thing real quick, because there's plenty of information about research that's been done on cognitive functioning and mood.
Oh, for sure.
In relation to exercise. So even in one single bout, I think I've mentioned this before, but even in one single bout of exercise, especially aerobic exercise, for engaging in low to moderate intensity for 20 minutes, has dramatic increases on mood and biochemical changes in the body. So it's not like, if you're experiencing high amounts of stress or depression or anxiety, or you just can't seem to wind down, exercise will actually help treat that and then not to its full capacity, but it will help. You'll help see a noticeable difference from just one workout or one low to moderate intensity bout of at least aerobic exercise. So I think it's important for people to know that stress management can be as simple as starting one single workout and going from there.
Oh yeah, no, and that's what I was going to say. Is for me, this is my stress relief through the world, is to go through weights or punch something.
Yeah, I mean, right now my main foundational workouts are every other day, and I can tell a difference in my mood and performance and cognitive ability, just in general, on the days that I'm not engaging in more moderate to higher intensity exercise. Which
would make sense, because you're not putting your body under a good stress, if you will, to compensate for bad stress.
I'm getting to the point where I want to, given time commitments and things like that, but and balancing with my goals. But I want to do a daily frequency in the gym without overtraining, but just for the mood benefits, to be honest. Right. Because I've battled depression in the past, and I still have anxiety.
Mm-hmm. Yup.
So, should we talk about cortisol related to stress?
No.
Or do you want to save that?
No, we don't. We don't need to talk about this, because it always corresponds when you have pain, and some of this stuff's going to be related to that. But we don't need to talk about. I don't think it's not tightly enough affiliated to make it worth talking about in this. But I do want to talk about the joint pain, because so one of the things that comes out of Cubicle stuff, and this is how I want to tie it back into the stuff when we were talking about scoliotic patterns, but is carpal tunnel.
That's a great example, yeah.
Yeah, because of the position of your hands and how you do it. Carpal tunnel is basically a repetitive stress because of repetitive motion, stress-related thing. So
that's induced from
multiple different
excessive writing, excessive typing,
I was going to say
kinking the wrist on the side of the desk.
Anything that restricts your hand into a position. So when you're typing, your hand goes into a position that will cause carpal tunnel related issues. If you're writing, going in that kind of situation. If you're answering the phone continually, it'll cause you to have potential problems with carpal tunnel stuff, because the tunnel itself, which I think I probably should post some stuff on the forum about.
That'd be informative.
Actually,
I think that'd be good.
Yeah, I'll probably have to do that, just because it's
to understand what's really going on.
Carpal tunnel isn't a bad thing; that's a good thing. And one of the things they do to deal with what's called carpal tunnel syndrome is they'll cut the carpal tunnel band and to give a freer movement. And in my opinion, that's extremely bad.
So what do you mean when you say carpal tunnel isn't bad? It's good. versus carpal tunnel syndrome.
Carpal tunnel is...
people are always saying carpal tunnel.
I know that, but carpal tunnel is actually the tunnel of where your tendons from
You're
your
just
forearm...
saying the actual anatomical
Yes, that's what carpal
aspect.
tunnel... That's what carpal tunnel is.
I just wanted to clarify that. So
right,
people...
that's why I'm saying I need to post some stuff on this so it's visible. I might have to go see if I can find some animation stuff and post this. But yeah, that's one of the things they'll do is they'll actually cut that band. And so it opens it up so that the tendons will have a freer position to move around.
Interesting.
In my opinion, it's not good at all. I think it's a terrible surgery.
Why is that?
Because all it does is cause more of a problem. It opens up the position that shouldn't be open.
It's kind of like the short term benefit, but has long term negative consequences.
It's not as bad. It's not as dramatically bad, but it's the same thing as what we talked about dealing with that new surgery that the FDA is talking about.
Yeah.
Different beast. It's a different beast, and there is more reason for it.
Would you compare it to like a spinal fusion?
Much more like a spinal fusion.
Because that's more relevant to...
Yeah, it's substantially tighter to that.
Because,
absolutely.
People report that a spinal fusion decreases pain, but then now we're talking about limited range of motion. And I don't know, I haven't looked at long-term issues related to spinal fusion, have you?
To a large extent. So a lot of things that will happen is one fusion will cause more than one. And the reason why is because it degenerates the discs that surround it.
So see, there's a huge thing to consider.
Oh yeah. Now, granted, there is definitely a reason to have it done, but I think it's done much faster than it should be in most cases.
More frequent.
Much more frequently than it should be.
Yeah.
So it's something that it goes back to what we were talking about in the last episode, as a matter of fact. But before we go I don't want to sidetrack off of carpal tunnel stuff. So if you do get something like carpal tunnel, you can work on a different muscle region. The problem is carpal tunnel syndrome is caused by restrictions in your forearm, in the anterior of your forearm, and the problem usually is that it will release if you work the antagonist. In the case of it actually doesn't seem to do that. It will to a small extent, but you'll have almost an exacerbated problem if they work the posterior of the forearm. So you have to go in and you almost have to do a physical modality like foam rolling. You could do to an extent, or something like that.
Well, but something more. I would even recommend more of the
golf ball.
Trigger point therapy focused stuff with more acute points of pressure, like you're talking about golf ball.
Deep tissue is the most optimal way to deal with this issue, in my opinion. But you have to know what you're doing, and understand that when you're working with venous flow of blood, you don't. Not that it's easy to do, but you don't want to have the veins get blown because you're working in the wrong direction. So I working with a Rolfer. I work the muscles, I don't worry as much about that.
Just mention what Rolfing is again, because that was
we were talking about Ida Rolf. That was in the last one.
Yeah,
but Ida Rolf was a gosh, what the heck was she? I know she was a doctor, but I can't remember what her actual field was. She's a high end knowledge, but she passed away years ago. But she created a modality, a style of deep tissue massage therapy that is highly intrusive. It goes in and it works really, really, really deep. And
you're working the deep muscles underneath the surface or superficial muscle groups.
Correct, and it is actually it is to make it so you realign the body. The common, if you will, logo shows a body kind of pieced out of and in different positions,
pushing it back together,
and it makes it go back in the position it should be in. Yes, kind of like chiropractic does, but dealing with the muscles instead of the bone.
Yeah,
but I work the muscle instead of when I work on a forearm, instead of worrying about the venous flow or the veins. The only problem is with excessive pressure, you can blow those.
Yeah.
And so knowing what you're doing, because you can actually work with it and work against it, but you have to know what you're doing in this again. The funny thing is people think massage therapy is something you don't have to have a pretty high-end knowledge on, and the reality is when you start dealing with certain things like the neuromuscular therapy stuff that I dealt with, especially when you're working with musculature in the eye, which most massage therapists won't even have a clue how to do, you really have to know what you're doing, because you can screw something up really fast and easy. When you move the trachea and you work behind it, that's semi-scary to what, it is the most bizarre feeling in the world when it clicks. It literally clicks out of place. And
that's weird.
And it's not that it hurts or anything like that. It's uncomfortable because you don't like it. But I
remember when my friend, who's a corrective massage therapist, Vince, was working on me. I've literally heard not painful, just popping, and
that's not unusual.
Yeah, and just different sounds that you're not used to hearing your body do as a result of being corrected. But you come out of it and you're actually in a much better position.
Oh, without question.
He even has done work on TMJ in the mouth, in the jaw. So
it's technically TMJD.
Yeah,
because again, the temporal mandibular joint is just where the mandible attaches to I can't remember the actual bone it connects to, but the skull itself. So it that's just the joint that holds that together. But the dysfunction of it is the problem with that. So, but that's kind of off this a little bit.
No, that's good. I just wanted. I like that you're kind of setting the scene. You talked about carpal tunnel being a big problem in a sedentary job,
because of what it does to your
typical American sedentary job. What other conditions do you typically see come out as a result of that? You'll
have a lot of pain issues that come from
joint, because we're talking joint stuff.
Joint stuff, shoulder stuff. You'll still have a problem with because of the forward rotation. You would know that though. You've dealt with that. Not on a personal note, probably, but on on a training note. But again, we've talked about the pelvis, the iliopsoas, which is technically two muscles, but it's more or less one because they attach. Connects on the back of the spine, and it does the anterior deep on the os coccyx, which is your pelvis bone. So it actually hits in two different places. You can't really hit a lot of that muscle, but I've touched almost every muscle in the body when I was working through neuromuscular therapy, the St. John's method. There's a lot of things that can happen. You're not going to have as many restrictions with your like ankle joint or knee joint based on it. You might have some restriction because of the nature of how you're sitting position.
Hips, back, and shoulders, right?
Yeah, which spurs back the other direction. You and I have talked preceding even doing this or even talking about this about how a lot of energy and a lot of problems stem from your ankles. Most of the stuff dealing with what we're talking about technically doesn't stem from your ankles, but it'll work backwards to your ankles. Yeah. And so understand that when you're dealing with almost anything, so we'll start from a point where if I was actually going to work with somebody and try and figure out how I had to deal with their pain issues with massage therapy, dealing with a lot of this stuff in scoliotic patterns. So you actually take measurements. So you look for hip rotation, you look for unevenness in your shoulders, you look for the os coccyx, again the pelvis bone, to be one side higher or lower as well. If you take measurements like that, you'll actually won't even have to check their back because you'll know how their spine's going of how it has to go.
Just from the visual.
Right. You look for rotations, internal rotations on your foot, without using more clinically based terms. You look for weaknesses and rotations on the knees, joints themselves. All that kind of stuff's going to transpire from this kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, it's either can be the source of or exacerbate joint conditions. So I remember you said you wanted to talk more on scoliotic patterns.
Well, I think what people need to understand on scoliotic patterns, and that's why I kind of drew him out of picture really fast. It's not anatomical, but it gives the idea. So
that's what's referred to as a C, and that's an S.
That's a C because you can see how that comes out, and then that's why it's an S.
Yeah.
This one's called an S because it looks like an S.
But it's a double S.
It's a double S because of how it goes from the neck. So if you put the actual neck into it. But if you notice on this picture, now granted you guys can't see this, but I'm going to try and describe this to him, and if he wants to help me do this so that we make sure you hear it right. When you're looking at what they call the C curve and I call the S curve, the restrictions, cause it so that you'll have, that's actually different. You went double S on that one. That actually should be the other direction. So, but you'll have a high shoulder and a low hip will be a C curve actually. Okay, because that'll actually be this way. And then you'll have, if they're the same direction, it'll be a double S curve.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's because what happens is with the musculature, your hip joint itself, because when you have something tighten in, it'll actually cause that rotation. So you'll have a rotation of the shoulder, and you'll have a rotation of your hip.
I have a client that has this C curve.
So what?
Pretty obvious.
Is it a gal?
Guy.
Is it okay? So
he's a taller fellow.
Kind of lanky.
6'3".
Okay.
Kind of thinner. Yeah.
So what'll happen is you'll see a restriction on this side. Now, trying to do this in training is really difficult. In massage therapy, it's a lot easier if you know what you're doing, because you'll work on. It'll be the equivalent of working 4 to 1. And so when you were asking on how to deal with a scoliotic pattern, including the winding stuff, you work four times as much on the restriction areas and 1 time on the other side, because if you work equally, it won't change.
Oh yeah, it'll maintain or make the problem worse.
If you work excessively on the outside of the actual problem, it will make it worse because it loosens this and it causes it to go deeper.
Yeah.
If you work on the inside equally, they'll both be equally released, and so it'll stay basically the same. If you work, the more you work on the internal, and if you don't work on the outside at all, you'll still have restrictions happen, and you'll have it fight it. And so that's the reason why you work 4 to 1, because you want to actually start to release this side. And what happens is
that's probably a good general rule for people who have any muscle imbalance.
Oh,
It's not necessarily a scoliotic pattern.
Absolutely.
But let's say, like we talked about in part 1, with protracted forward shoulder and a weaker upper posterior chain, is or upper back is for people could follow that protocol and work their back. Or properly work certain muscle groups in the back 4 times as often as they do chest.
Right.
Okay, just clarifying so people
Right.
can get a good understanding of how to apply that to other groups.
As long as you do it smart and kind of pay attention, because that changes the dynamics a little bit, because you're working with increased size and such with training.
Mm-hmm.
But as you do that, what will happen is as this releases, you'll start to have it go back from a curve, more and more straightening, and then eventually it'll be straight. Now, granted, especially in a case where they're born that way, and that's where it changes a little bit, because at that point you can still work it. It would be better to work on someone if you know how to do infant massage and you were doing something similar to this and you knew what you were doing. And granted, I'm not recommending this because this is something that would be high-end knowledge, and there's not many people on the planet that could do this right, but and I wouldn't be one of them. But working on infancy, it's going to cause this to unwind a lot faster. You're not going to have the same problems.
Yeah, because they haven't. Those patterns haven't been established.
They are not as established. But
yeah.
Like I said, you can have calcification. You can have other things that cause it to fuse naturally. But if you work on it correctly and cause the muscles on one side that's restricting, it will literally put you back into that state. Now, like I said, your body's already have a pattern that it wants to go to, so it'll pull automatically back to the other direction. And so if you continue to have someone that knows what they're doing work on this, eventually what will happen is this will become more of a normal pattern, the straight line pattern that it's supposed to be, with the right curves, of course. And you will be able to do your own corrective. There we go. My mouth didn't want to work. Exercises and stretches that will cause you to be able to keep it straight. And that's, like I said, that's why you don't have to continue to go to a massage therapist, because after someone who does what they're doing, it will cause it to be straight enough from what they're doing that if you do the right things, it will keep it in that place, and your body will naturally go to that. Now, I have a problem with, and I'll draw this out for
you
Taylor
personally,
again. Yeah, with a short leg. So what will happen is because
isn't that psoas related?
No,
or are you saying your
I
actual
have
bone?
an actual bone structure short leg.
Really?
Yeah, my left leg is shorter than my right.
Because I've seen that a lot, actually, and people say, oh, well,
it's a rotation thing.
One leg is shorter than the other, and I say, well, I'm not, I usually refer them to, like I said, a corrective massage therapist, but often it comes back to a tight a radically tight iliopsoas that causes
and it doesn't necessarily
one leg
have
to
to be
seem shorter
yes,
than the
and
other.
that's more common that it's actually not an actual shortness. It's a I keep wanting to use the word winding, but it's not
rotation,
right. A rotation.
Yeah.
A rotation that causes that. But in what will happen is when you have a short leg, on the short leg side, it'll cause that entire side to drop. So because our
well, yeah, because like they have a shorter. If it's actually a shorter limb,
Yep.
and not a muscle imbalance necessarily, that leg's going to want to hit the ground.
which is going to rotate your hips.
Yeah, which is going to move the whole
Which is going
ships
to
and then
rotate
the
your
spine
hips,
and then the shoulders.
Exactly. At which point you have
Becomes systemic.
You have an automatic, natural. Your body's going to do this no matter what.
Scoliotic
pattern.
But I can see that. So, but it's as a result of another issue.
Yes.
It's not necessarily the scoliotic pattern itself. It's a symptom of an issue another issue.
See, and I'll give you that in the majority of cases, in my classes we had a chiropractor who I dealt with that taught the class on this specific topic. But go ahead.
I was going to just say real quick. Could this be caused by any type of like side dominance, handedness, dominant leg, or like you had mentioned in the previous episode, carrying
without question,
like a purse or a heavy bag?
Oh yeah, without question.
On one
now,
side
now
of the
short
body.
leg won't be, but yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm wondering. Would it create any type of issue that way?
You mean a short leg?
Not a literal short limb,
so
but like an imbalance.
You're talking the movements.
Yeah. Obviously, it's not going to like deteriorate
that's
the
reason
length
why,
of their bone or something.
Well, no, but it will cause a rotation that would cause that eventually.
Okay, that's what I was getting at.
But yeah, will you get like scoliosis from overuse on one side? Of course you will. Any unbalanced reactions in how you deal with anything is going to cause a tilt of the scale, if you will, in which case you'll have a dominant side be weighted differently, which is going to cause it to rotate. I mean, there's no way around that.
It's just interesting because we're talking about this, and it's so common. Walk down the street, go to the mall, go
high shoulders,
go anywhere that there's a lot of people, and just watch for different weird gait patterns or body positions because it's everywhere.
Oh, I'm bad
like
for it.
My own grandmother, she walks. It almost kind of looks like a limp, but it's. I haven't really assessed what the imbalance would be with her, but there's just a dramatic change in her gait pattern over the last few years.
Right.
And I mean, she's getting older, and sometimes that happens. And if you don't address those issues, it just exacerbates them.
It always gets worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no way around that too.
But I think it's important that people realize, like, we don't just get old and deteriorate and get these poor patterns. It's a systemic chronic thing that can take place, and that which means it can be addressed if addressed early enough.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it can improve your quality of life. So if you're living a sedentary lifestyle or working a job that's creating health issues for you, you're not stuck. You're not lost. You're not a lost cause, and it's not inevitable. It's I get frustrated sometimes when people talk about, well, I get older, so my metabolism naturally slows. You deteriorate when you get older, and it's like, yes, that can tend to be a pattern, but that's as a result of not setting yourself up for success. People naturally lose muscle and gain fat as they get older because they become less active.
Absolutely. Well, that's part of it. Okay.
Part of it.
Now, in fairness,
I mean, hormones play a role in metabolism. We've talked about that. So
well,
obviously,
oxygen is both one of our best things in the world and one of the worst things in the world for you.
Oxidative stress? Is that what you're getting?
No, I'm talking oxygen itself, because oxygen actually will cause you to basically, oxygen is one of the reasons why you die. It overall, what it does to you physiologically, it actually eventually will kill you. It's not like it's not something you need. You have to have oxygen. If you don't have oxygen, you're going to die. So it's not like something. But over time, that gravity, hormone base, injury sites, all these things play on you. And so when people say that, it's true. But it's like I say to people all the time: why do I go to the gym? Because I'm fighting death.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is it's not an inevitability. It's not an inevitability. It is meaning that the outcomes.
No,
do you know what I'm saying?
No, I think I do, but I disagree.
Because what you're saying is those things will take place in life.
You don't have,
and there's outcomes.
You don't have to give in to them. Is what I'm thinking. Is a better way to say it.
Well, I'm saying that there's ways to prevent, slow, and treat. You
can slow, but eventually. Okay, so let's be fair. Death is going to eventually get everybody.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be in the best shape of your life when you go, probably, unless you get in a car accident or something. But the thing is what I'm suggesting is you have to use exercise, you have to use these other things, and look at these things like gait pattern problems. I mean, not being knowledgeable about it, it's hard to see it in yourself, but that causes a lot of the problems with back issues. That causes a lot of problems with shoulder. My shoulder injury probably stems from I know it's from an overuse type situation for sure, but you can fight it. It's not that you can't fight it. What you're saying overall is kind of somewhat true in that you can combat it, but because you don't have to submit to it. Mm-hmm. But people think that okay, well, if I get injured, it's a problem, so they don't go out of the house. That's worse.
Yeah.
Movement is something your body has to do.
Movement is life.
Absolutely.
I love the analogy. I mean, it's a loose analogy, but you buy a brand new car, park it on the side of the road, and never drive it. It's going to deteriorate faster than if you drive it and work the engine and put the liquids through it and all sorts of things. Our bodies are kinetic machines, and movement keeps them alive. That's why it's ironic that you stay sedentary all day and you feel worse than if you were to do low to moderate physical activity more often.
For sure.
Use keeps us alive, because it's the use and disuse principle, just like we talked about muscle atrophy. If you don't use it, your body will just eat it away. Right.
So yeah, and like I said, I thought that's why I thought we should continue at least this stuff with massage therapy. I would like to bring your buddy in here. It would be nice to talk to. For one,
it'd be really cool to see you two, since you both have that background where I don't. That'd be really interesting conversation.
I'm really curious to know what these studies are, because there's a large amount of different modalities for massage therapy. So I'm kind of curious to know what he does. But even when he went to school, because I mean, his timeline and mine, it's got to be different, I'm sure. But yeah, like I said, this is something, if you have a scoliotic pattern, it is definitely something that's treatable, and you don't have to wear a back brace to do it. Mm-hmm. That's one of the techniques they used to use back in the day. I think they still probably do. But the reality of life is almost everybody has a scoliotic pattern to an extent. Mm. Just because you're going to have a high shoulder.
You've
hopefully that explains.
You've addressed for sure. You've addressed a potential for a scoliotic pattern in myself based off what you've observed about me.
Yeah.
Now it could be iliopsoas related. It could be other things. But remember, there was a few years ago where you showed me on the lateral to my lumbar spine where muscles were tight and very loose.
Right.
Based off your assessment, would you say I have a scoliotic pattern?
Yeah, I know you have a scoliotic pattern.
Would you say which type of pattern it is?
I would have to measure to be exact. I could do it quick, but obviously I'm not going to do it right this very second. But
I was just curious if you had any insight on that I wanted to share that you've observed that maybe we haven't.
Well, like I said, and to make this really simple, if you have, like I said, if you have a high shoulder and a high hip on the same side, you have what would be commonly referred to as a C curve.
Oh, that's good information.
If you have a low hip and a high shoulder on the same side, you have what's called an S curve.
Mm. Okay, perfect.
Because let me think.
No, yeah, you're right.
High and high would be an S curve. High and low would be, because I did that one wrong.
Oh, I see.
Because your hip would condense, so that'd be a C curve. So if you have a low shoulder and a high hip, that would be a C curve. If you have a high and high, it would be an S curve because of the way your back has to move. Mm. But you'll be able to have that for sure. In fact, if you can look in the mirror and tell that you have a high shoulder, you have scoliosis for sure. You don't have to do another test. That will tell you that for sure. It doesn't tell the severity, but it definitely tells that you have it.
And it wouldn't necessarily tell you the root cause, would it? Because like we talked about, a short leg could cause it.
A short leg could cause it.
A psoas issue could cause it.
A psoas issue is the same thing as everything else. So in general, it's either going to be genetic predisposition. I almost said that right. Which the person you were talking about before, she would have had. That still probably is going to tie to musculature, but it may actually be fusing of different vertebrae. Mm-hmm. I said the word. I've been trying to say that word this whole day. And it is that is something that, like I said, you cannot change that dealing with muscle. That's a completely unrelated thing. Fusions are definitely part of that because that makes more sense. But like I said, there's problems to doing fusions if you don't need them. I recommend not doing them. Having herniated discs, I refuse to do it. I think it's a mistake to do it. So, it really comes down to a knowledge base and how to deal with things. But in general, the majority of the time, it's either by a movement pattern or just how you sit I mean, different things like that. You may not be able to see the exact root, but it's going to come back to musculature. Mm-hmm. Always does. Yeah. Bone cannot, like I said, bone does not move itself. If you dig a bone and drop it on the cement, it's going to stay there. It's not going to get up and walk off. And so, that's the reason why when somebody's trying to talk about the idea of fixing it by moving bone, and again, I'm not hacking chiropractic because technically what they're doing is effective. But when you're just moving a bone and going to a chiropractor, it's a treatment that is partial. It's more like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that's got a knife stuck in it. You're not. It's going to stay bleeding. There's no way around it. It will continue to bleed because the injury hasn't been fixed. And so if you don't start dealing with the root problem, which is muscular related, then you'll continue to have the problem. So going to a chiropractor forever to deal with something like scoliosis will fix it to it. Will what's the word I'm looking for? It's not fix.
Remedy.
Not even remedy. It will. Gosh, I can't think of it. But it basically. It's a treatment of sorts, but it's short-lived. It'll always go back to the pattern that it wants to be in.
That's when it's important to, if you need or are going to work with a massage therapist, a trainer, a chiropractor, a doctor. In my opinion, they should be focused on educating you and have the mind of a teacher.
I agree with that.
And be focusing on preventative as much as you can as well, and then obviously providing solution, but preventative education for the future. Like if you go to a chiropractic and they adjust and say, okay, see you next week, that's not necessarily the right chiropractor to go to, even if they're good at what they do.
Well, and that's a yes and no. That's a yes and no. So I want to share this a little bit because of where you're going. And like I said, I believe in chiropractic. It's very helpful for me when my back's injured because I have that problem. My back, like I said, I have herniations, so there's things where my back goes out of place all the time. But going to the correct massage therapy, and this is okay. I won't jump out of line yet. I'll actually finish what I'm thinking, then I'll go back to it. But a good massage therapist will give you a better effect than a good chiropractor when it deals with certain things.
Yeah,
but in conjunction, they're amazing because chiropractic will actually help the structure get back to where it should be. Massage therapy will help it hold.
Yeah.
But if you go to a good massage therapist that knows what they're doing, it's not that they'll do it a correction, but the musculature will cause it to become a correction on its own.
But what I'm getting at, and I agree with you, but what I'm getting at is that any of these professionals, health professionals,
they should
be focused on saying, this is what's caused this. This is how it got this way. This is what I'm going to do, but it's not a long-term solution. You need to do this to continue to take care of this issue.
And I get that.
And prevent future problems.
I get that. The only thing is you may go to a chiropractor that doesn't understand that, and this is why I'm saying this.
And you may go to a trainer that doesn't know what they're talking about too.
But they still may be able to help you. So it's not that you shouldn't go to them. It would be better if they helped you through it. Because the ultimate goal...
Any help is still help.
Right. And the ultimate goal is, and I'm going to toot our horn, but that's why you guys listen to us, is the idea is we're trying to give you information, and sometimes we have to research this. Sometimes we don't know all this necessarily off the top of our heads, but we're going to try and get the best information for you guys when we do this because we want you guys to know what you're talking about. Taylor and I both want you guys to know as much as you possibly can when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's something that we feel is important for the world to know and understand. But that doesn't mean that, and this is why I'm saying this, it doesn't mean that the chiropractor is bad because he doesn't know. He just isn't going to give you a full treatment. And so going in as someone who's on the side of the injury themselves, the more information that you have is going to be better to deal with the actual problem.
Yeah.
And they'll be a tool. So you go in, they're going to be your tool to actually set your back in the right position. If they do it right and set you up, you go find another tool to help you keep it in that position, and then you use another tool to keep yourself in that in that state once you get to a good position, and then you won't have the problems anymore because you've actually rectified them.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because that's how you have to work through it. I think it's on the person's in the words of the clinical world, the patient's responsibility to have the knowledge base. It's good if they can be a teacher. The best are going to be teachers that you go see.
Well, but that's the thing is patients need
I'm not
to know.
talking. I'm not talking the patients though. I'm talking the doctors. If the doctor
Well, you said the responsibility of knowledge is on the patient.
I think the responsibility of knowledge is on the patient. I'm saying that it's better
seeking the information.
Absolutely, but I'm going to tell you that the doctors or the chiropractors or the massage therapists may or may not know the information that we're talking about, so that they're not necessarily a bad instrument to get to that point.
Sure.
But the better for the information basis is exactly what you're saying. I think a teacher in the world, especially of massage therapy or trainers, trying to get somebody to not necessarily need to come to them because they want to come to them. They go to them,
but to establish self-sufficiency at some point.
Exactly right, because they should be. If you train a person to fish,
yeah,
you know what I mean. If you train a society to fish, what ultimately ends up happening is you have a world or a society that is actually able to take care of itself, self-sustaining.
Not to, because I wanted, we've talked about this a number of times, but just to readdress, that's why we do this podcast, because there are many facets of the health and fitness industry and supplement industry as part of that focus on the opposite of this. They focus on, whether it's intentional or not, exploiting consumers, making consumers dependent upon them, and not educating. And that's the whole point behind this, is to help establish self-sufficiency, because we are failing in our battle against unhealthy lifestyles, and that's what we want to eradicate. Is we want to help people so that you're not dependent on us,
right? Exactly,
and other health professionals.
Yep, that was one of our goals doing this.
Yeah,
I did draw it right.
Nice.
I had to show you the shoulders.
He's got all these stick figures with like muscle imbalances and weird patterns. Anyway, so anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that covered it pretty well. Honestly, what I really want is anybody who's listening that has any questions related to this kind of stuff, because I think this is actually very heavily tied to the health and well-being of people. And this is what I was going to get to before. In fact, now that you guys say that, yes, I do have one other thing I wanted to add, because I was going to say this before and I didn't sidetrack. I've said this in an earlier podcast, but I really want to emphasize this. When it comes to your health and dealing with pain, or to an extent injury, the line of defense, in my opinion, okay, and again, this is an opinion piece, is massage therapy, chiropractic, and then a doctor. And the reason, and you can even go beyond that. I would say a trainer, I would say a nutritionist of some sort, and then a massage therapist, and then a chiropractor, and then an MD. And the reason why is because that is a healthier path.
Those first three are preventative, potentially.
Exactly right. And
I'm not to
massage
say that,
therapy is not necessarily,
but not to say that a doctor is not preventative. It's just that doctors are medicinal doctors do very well with medicine and trauma and acute issues, and
I have a question on that then.
Recovery from those types of conditions.
I have a question, because you said something that I actually am curious to know your thoughts on. So when you say that they're not necessarily corrective, not corrective, how did you phrase that?
Preventative.
Preventative. How are they preventative?
How are doctors preventative?
Absolutely, I'm curious. Because I actually disagree with you.
Now, how are doctors utilized? Because I know that you're talking about the Eastern versus Western medicine approach, right?
Well, I would go down that road, but I'm talking about it from the United States. So no, I'm not talking about the East. I'm talking about literally our doctors. I don't understand how they're preventative, because I don't believe that they are.
The system is set up in a way that it doesn't incentivize it as a preventative way.
I agree with that.
Okay, doesn't mean a doctor can't be preventative.
I didn't say they couldn't be. I'm saying that they're technically not. Because why do you go to a doctor?
No, I understand, to get fixed, but that's based off of how things. Here's an example: an ethical doctor who's not just looking to profit, writing a book or doing a podcast or whatever, like Jake Wilson. He's a PhD. He's technically a doctor of sorts.
That's true,
right? He's giving people information that will help them live a healthier lifestyle.
Jake, you're a stud. If you have ever hear this, I think you are the man.
Right?
I want that to be said.
It's a matter of how a doctor utilizes their education. If they choose to only operate in a fashion in the normal traditional medicinal healthcare system,
he's not
where they're only being seen.
Okay,
they're only being utilized by people, that are seeing them because they already have an established problem.
He's not a medical doctor though. So what I'm talking
I know,
about, I'm not talking.
I'm saying a doctor of sorts.
You're right.
My dad is a doctor of psychology. He's not an MD.
You're right. But again, my question comes back. I guess I should be more specific. I don't think an MD is preventative.
Well, an MD specifically studies for the majority medicine.
Yes.
For use in prescription of medicine.
Yes.
And I agree with you, but I'm seeing doctors as a whole.
Well,
healthcare
yeah,
professionals.
but there's so many doctors because you can talk about psychology, physiology, physiology,
endocrinology.
Well, then we're actually going back in the same direction.
Okay.
But no, I'm talking like my brother. He has his PhD in psychology.
My point being that
education.
Sure, MDs by themselves, it's a harder argument to make as a matter of preventative in the nature.
What I was looking for.
In the nature of what they do,
right?
Which is drug prescription,
and that's why I'm saying that.
But I didn't want to lump all doctors into the same category. So I know we've dissed on doctors before, but I don't mean to generalize.
And I'm not dissing on them. And this is going to go a little bit longer than I was planning because I really do want to finish this part of this. But the thing about that's why I'm saying when people talk about doctors in general, they're talking about. Especially again,
they're general practitioner.
They're talking about an MD.
Yeah.
Okay. And in my opinion, they are great for emergencies. Mm-hmm. I think their education is built around emergency situations, and because of that, they don't have that. It's not they don't have the knowledge base, but they don't have the. In some ways, they don't have the knowledge base.
In some situations, but I do have an example. My preferred doctor. I've gone to somebody for the last couple of years because I moved quite far away from him, but. There's a doctor at a clinic that I used to go to have my blood work run as a preventative measure because that's also covered under most people's insurance. Some panels at least are covered, usually cholesterol and some metabolic panels, and some hormone depending on your age.
Right.
You go in, you don't necessarily have an issue, and you say, I want to get a physical to check my general health, and I want to get certain blood panels run to make sure that I'm in general health. Those are preventative measures that normal MDs or physicians will run for you.
Okay, that's fair.
And I would have
that's fair. I agree with that.
Yeah, given my background, I would like to have conversations with my doctor, and I talk to him about supplements.
Well, we've talked about that. That's recommended in both of our minds. That's a good thing to do, especially as you get older.
Yeah, and so that's where even just your general MD can still be helpful because in terms of if you want to keep this up. Your blood work looks like this. Maybe this is a red flag here. It's not a big deal, but I want you to start working. I want you to diet, exercise, and whether they're as well versed or not, they can still help in being preventative. But like you said, I'm playing devil's advocate here.
No, you're right on that.
But I agree that those first three.
That's true. That's very true.
At least people that focus on. There's other professionals that typically focus on preventative care more so than others. Right. And I'm just not saying that. All doctors don't, because many can and many do. It just depends on their implementation of their education.
Yeah, and that's true. And I got to give you that. I wasn't thinking along those lines because I wasn't thinking about tests. Usually that's almost always spurred by somebody coming in. But that being said, that makes sense.
I think that they're underutilized in that realm.
Yeah, I agree with that.
The average client that I see, I'm like, okay, when was the last time you had a physical and blood work? Sometimes it's like 5 or 6 years.
Right.
I go every year. And this is something that people can get that's covered on their insurance. They're already paying for it.
Right.
It's not like they're going to pay extra.
I would say...
Unless you're running specific panels.
I agree with all that. Here's the problem. And sorry, people, we're going to make this really stinking long because I'm not ready to stop. But so I'm gonna hack a little bit on doctors, in my opinion. In
MDs or doctors in general?
MDs specifically because of the nature of it. And it's not because they can't do this. It's because they don't think along this. They think pharmaceuticals. So here's my issue with them. Is on the preventative side of it. Absolutely true when you're talking blood tests. Okay? Very, very, very rarely, unless they're looking for a reason, which is not. It's not preventative. It's figuring out. Okay? They're using it as a path to find out what's going on.
You're saying how it's generally used?
Yes, and so
yeah.
My problem is if doctors would literally prescribe training and nutrition correctly.
Some do,
but
many do.
And I agree with that. But I'm saying usually it's behind the scenes, and so if it could be more utilized, they use trainers. And people with an education in nutrition outside of themselves, then I would agree with you more so.
Yeah.
I agree with where you're going, though. Your path is correct. And so I stand corrected, and I want to... Because I don't think they do that. I think most of the time...
I agree with you on that. I think that there's many that do not when they ought to or could.
Most.
And because someone comes in, they run the preventative blood panels, they realize, oh, crap, you need a statin. And they're going to turn them down the path of... statins too. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
They're going to turn them down the path of getting the statin because that's maybe how they're trained.
Yes, and I know.
But they could also say, you know what? You're at that level where we could do drugs, but I really don't want to if we don't have to.
Right.
Let's have you... I'm going to refer you to a registered dietitian, and then, here's a local trainer I know that is educated.
Right.
That I trust.
I think that's important.
And that's the only problem I have with our training industry is, was it easier for me to get into the industry and get some experience? Yes. But it's a double-edged sword because I wish that trainers sometimes can't, or the community has a harder time viewing trainers on us as a similar level as other health professionals because there's fewer regulations.
Gotcha.
And so it is harder to find a more qualified trainer.
Man, maybe we should break this off and go into another one. Part 3. We won't have to call
this
part
is
3.
so much different than what we started, but
it's still based on the same concepts.
Yeah.
I mean, this all ties together with it.
If you can take specific steps to get yourself in better health, especially if you have a sedentary job or a sedentary lifestyle, you won't need to deal with a lot of these issues.
That's
or
true.
You'll have a much better time in dealing with any issues.
Well, I'm going to give you guys, even though Taylor's going to probably be mad at me for saying this, our next one, I think we're going to be talking about trainers.
Again, just part 2 of...
just what qualifications, but this one's going to be more questions and answers type thing between you and I think.
Okay.
Because I want to discuss this.
Okay, cool.
So, we'll call it. I'm not saying anymore. I'm not even going to say bye. I'm just going to shut up.
I'm just going to wrap it up if they're still listening. So listen to part 1 if you haven't listened to part 2. We cover sleep patterns, postural deviations, muscle imbalances, muscle atrophy. This one touched briefly upon weight gain, energy and stress, and especially joint-related conditions and related to sedentary jobs and lifestyles. And so sound good? All right, see you later, guys. Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. Shane and I hope you learned something new and exciting today about your own health and fitness. Head over to metabolicradio.com. There you'll find our bios and our results-driven programs that are designed to help teach you everything you need to know when it comes to getting real permanent results. You can also sign up for our newsletter to get free weekly updates. To chat with Shane or I, just email us at taylor@metabolicradio.com or shane@metabolicradio.com. We would love to hear from you. You can also join the conversation on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com and search for Metabolic Radio Private Forum. There you can request to join the group. We would love to add you to the conversation and answer your questions on the show. And hey, if you like our podcast, please help us grow our community by leaving us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. We would really appreciate your help. Thanks again so much for all your support and your listenership. Now go out there and spread the good word of fitness.